I've been asked to just briefly introduce this section on digital marketing. I mean, it's almost self-evident to say that if we look at the history of business and marketing, it's a story of technological change and adaptation. And I'm going to restrict what I want to say to marketing. I'm a professor of marketing in the School of Business. Now, I don't know if it's just because marketers are a particularly egotistical and vain bunch that you probably think that they are. I probably tend to agree. Marketers tend to like to credit themselves with great creative insights and strategic vision, which they then use to explain successful marketing. Whereas actually, when we analyse this, we can actually see that many marketing advances and achievements can really be attributed to those marketers who embrace new and emerging opportunities and particularly new technologies, and therefore use those as a way to drive through and achieve marketing objectives. It's that for me is the core element of successful marketing, which is blending together the innovation with creative insight. And digital marketing is the textbook example of this process in action today. And if we're honest, many marketers are still trying to really figure out what it can and should be used for. And that's why it's really important that we turn to some of the experts that have been working in this area to give us that view from the field, as it were. It's important for us to see digital marketing as having both a tactical and a strategic potential, okay? But it's also important for us not to conflate the two. I do have concerns that digital marketing has been both oversold and undersold in the business community. It's been oversold to the extent that it's often presented as a kind of magic or wizardry, if you like, where firms can rapidly increase sales, build customer loyalty, target hard to reach segments, usually at little or no cost. Usually these panaceas turn out to be less than what we thought they were going to be. But at the same time, it's also been undersold to the extent that we're still trying to find exactly how to harness digital communications effectively in a customer environment that's increasingly cluttered, fleeting, fragmented, and to a certain extent chaotic. Now, of course, one of the main causes of all this uncertainty is that the very same innovations that open up new opportunities and methods for marketing strategy are also transforming consumer expectations, consumer lives and desires. I think it's probably fair to say that the digital marketing environment is one where consumers and buyers are more active, less passive. They are more empowered. They're more social in a kind of way, and they're also probably less loyal. So it's a challenge of what we can call the age of distance, if you like, whereby customers and markets are both closer and more distant at the same time. So in order to help us begin to navigate some of these challenges, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Ann Stanley, who's the founder and CEO of Anicca Digital, the independent digital marketing agency that provides integrated marketing services to some of the UK's best known brands. Anicca support B2B and B2C clients, and they offer a huge amount of expertise in digital marketing across a variety of sectors. So over to you, Anne.
Thanks very much, James. That was a really interesting introduction. So it's quite difficult to talk to an audience like this without really knowing who's in the audience, and consequently what I wanted to do in this presentation was to assume that some people have no knowledge at all and other people would be already really mature in their digital marketing journey. So what I've decided to cover is I'll do a little bit of an introduction on myself and Anicca, but I'm going to explain exactly what marketing communications is and how that fits in with digital marketing channels, and just give you an overview of just the variety and of techniques that you can use to drive your business or drive people to your website or into your social media, and actually make money. So this is all about the commerciality of generating leads and generating sales. So it's not just you know, a hobby we're talking about here. We're talking about how to really transform your business. I also want to try and give an understanding of the trade-off, or the sort of tug of war between your requirements as a business and your users' requirements, and how they don't always match, and how there's a sort of a bit of a balancing act. And then I want to go on to the more audience focused side of things, and that's really understanding the different types of personas, the different need states, or the stages in the buying cycle, and how you can create strategies to get those combination, the people at the right time, and get the information, content and ads in front of them. And then I'll try and get through the first sessions relatively rapidly. I've got about 40 slides to do in 30 minutes, so there's quite a lot of meat in here. So if we need to skip some of the detail, you know, you guys can read faster than I can. But I want to get onto some of the techniques that we use, particularly around paid social. And I think a lot of people think paid social is just posting, boosting a post, whereas actually it's significantly more sophisticated than that. And then at the end, I've just got a load of free resources for you, and some freebies that you can take advantage of. Okay, so without further ado, so I actually started my career at Leicester University really scarily over 40 years ago. I came into the Adrian building as a biological scientist, and I was there at the same time as Alec Jeffreys. I then actually worked there for another 5 years, and then 87 I had my daughter, completely unplanned. I was in the middle of a PhD, and then that changed my direction. And then I worked at Oxford University and Cooper's Animal Health, which is now GSK. I then spent 9 years working in the leather industry, but I was still a scientist. I was looking at the anatomy of collagen and skin and the processes around making leather. So, you know, people talk about hyaluronic acid and elastin and collagen. Well, I've got massive photographs of actually explaining what happens to this stuff when you make leather. I then moved into clinical trials, and I spent 5 years. And at the end of my career at BLC, I started to become a marketeer, because what I was doing contract research, and I began to learn how to do marketing. And then I took that into clinical research, where I was responsible for recruiting volunteers to take drugs for money, basically. And that's when I did my CIM exams, and I also did an MBA before then. And then in 2002, I migrated into the world of digital marketing, which was very, very early on. And Anicca was actually created in 2007. So I founded in 2007, so it's nearly 15 years old. And obviously Anicca's evolved a lot from just 3 of us to nearly 30 of us. So yeah, so we established Anicca in 2007. We have about 40 clients. There's 27 staff, although I think we'll be at 30 by the end of the next month. And we really focused on quite complicated clients across a range of different sectors, quite a lot of B2B, about 2/3 B2B, but we do both e-commerce and lead generation. So some reasonably well-known brands there. I had hoped that Charles Bentley would have been able to join us today, but due to a diary clash, I've ended up being on my own. But some of the examples I'm going to give you today are from actual client projects. And because of my background, we do a lot in pharmaceutical and construction and manufacturing industries. Okay, so let's get back to really, really simple marketing then. So what is marketing communication? Well, marketing communication, doesn't matter whether it's online or offline, is basically getting a message from the sender to, or the brand to the target audience. And we talk about this in the format of either an ad or specific content. And then the media or the marketing channel is the way we communicate that message. So what I'm focusing on today is 2 things. I'm focusing on the different channels that we can use and the target audience. I'm not really going into the message or the ads apart from one slide. I'm really focusing on which channels get to which target audience. So if you look at that from the concept of finding a website, we've got this huge crowd of new and potential customers, and we've got your brand website. And there's really three main ways that people will find you. They'll find you through search, so that's through the search engines. They'll find you through social media platforms, and then they'll find you through other sites, mainly media sites, but it could be through Amazon, it could be through a blog or a directory, or in some respects, it could be something like an email that's been pushed out from that brand. But really, we divide the platforms into these three categories. Now, typically, the naming structure that we use is that this is your target audience, this is the media channel, and we do divide those channels into 4 types. Now, for people that are traditional marketeers, you've probably heard of paid, owned and earned media before, but we've added tech onto it, or technology onto it, and used the acronym POET, which I will explain in a little bit more detail. But it's quite easy, really. Paid is advertising, you have to pay to be there, or pay to play. Owned is the stuff that you control yourself, so it's your content, it's your social profiles, it's your websites, it's your email. And earned is the stuff that other people talk about you. It's PR, it's the shared social content. And then technology, this is the stuff that James was talking about. This is the AI, this is the voice search, this is the Internet of Things, but also it's all the infrastructure that actually powers the marketing. It's the tracking, it's the analytics, it's the shopping feeds, it's all the technical stuff that without getting that right, you're not going to do the rest of it right. Now, there's one more aspect to this that I want to mention, and that is we don't just have websites to drive visitors. I mean, some websites do if it's an educational site or you're trying to provide useful information. But the majority of sites have got a commercial purpose, and that's generally to generate leads or sales. And the big shock to most people when they enter digital marketing for the first time is just how few people actually convert on a website. It can be as low as 1 to 5%. So that means for every 100 people that come to your website, probably 50% of them are going to leave immediately. We call that bouncing. Or bouncing off the site, and then it's 1 to 5% of them will actually convert. So if you have to pay for your traffic, you need to take this into consideration, because it might cost you more to acquire a customer than they're actually worth. And that's what digital marketing is about, is trying to get these people to your website as cost effectively as possible, but to generate the leads or the sales. So I'm not actually going to go through this in any detail, but I do want you to be aware of the sorts of digital marketing channels that we use, and they're really extensive. And the problem is for many people is they just don't know where to start. And this is the tactical stuff that James mentions. This is the stuff that actually is the bread and butter of running an e-commerce website, or running an insurance company, or a mortgage company, or a plumber. It's the stuff that actually gets the phones ringing or gets people walking into your store. And we use this POET as a way of dividing them up into nice, easy ways of understanding what each of them do. And the other thing you tend to find is that when you talk to marketeers, they tend to be specialists in each of these areas. So you tend to have specialists in paid media, or specialists in SEO and email. These tend to be very content heavy. Or you have people that are responsible for PR and social media, where it's more creative and it's more about the story. And so you've got different specialisms within each of those areas. Now, each of these channels, if you go back to my cloud diagram, search engine, social media and display, also can be divided into a grid of earned and owned and paid. And so what we see with paid media is that it's really immediate. You can buy the audience, you can get in front of people, you can do that immediately, but you have to pay for the privilege. The advantage of that, of course, is it's a really good way of getting in front of the right audience that are likely to be buying or actually responding to demand. So in search engines, you see the Google ads at the top. They could be shopping ads with an image, or the text ads. And that is very, very powerful at getting and driving your business. Whereas if you wanted to be found for search engine optimization, which is the free stuff on the left-hand side, it takes a lot longer. You've got to build up your brand. You've got to build up the trust of your website. So we tend to have two types of strategies. We tend to have the immediate, the now. I've got to get those leads and sales now. And then we have the more long term, the more brand building strategies, the more strategic stuff, which takes more time and takes more money. We also need to understand that users are at different stages in the sales funnel. They're at different stages of that user journey. You know, they may not even be aware of you. They may not even know that they're looking for a product or service. And so what you're doing at this stage is you're trying to get in front of people that don't know you exist. Whereas if you go further down the funnel, people will become more aware of you, and they may be considering you, and you may be in their shortlist of brands that they want to talk to or they want to purchase. And then you get down to the conversion point. And when you think of people going and searching in Google, like I'm looking for some new furniture for my office, I don't really care about brand loyalty anymore. I just want the best deal. And so then the stuff that James mentioned about the lack of loyalty, it's really about the offer and getting people at the right time and the right place. And so a lot of people, when they start off, they're focused on their marketing activity and their budget right at the bottom of the funnel, because that's the thing that's going to bring in the money now. And that's partly because they haven't got enough resources, either time or money, to worry about the long-term brand awareness and the time it takes to build that up, or even customer retention and keeping the customers you've already got. But what you need to think about as a business is that every single person that's visiting your site or interacting with your brand will be at a different stage. And so your messaging and the way that you talk to them has to differ depending on where they are. The other thing that you can do, which is really, really powerful, is you can have sequential advertising, which actually takes them through to the different stages. So, for example, if somebody's interacted and watched a video, then you can put them into an audience, and then you can send them a second or a sequential ad, which will then get them further to the point of sale. So you're pushing everybody down that funnel. Now, what you can do is you can look at the different channels and look at where they work and which ones work for different stages in the buying funnel or the sales funnel. And you can see that the owned and earned media, they're often about awareness and consideration, and a few of them really act at the bottom of the funnel. So this is often associated with the more long-term strategies. Now, if you compare that with paid advertising can be classified in a slightly different way. So you can classify it by the type of channel. So this is really things like whether it's search or display or social or shopping, or these hybrid ones which we talked about earlier, like programmatic TV or Spotify ads or podcasts or advertising on podcasts or being on a podcast. So you can see that there's lots of different types of ads in different types of channels, but also those ads are generally designed in a way that you choose the type of campaign depending on what you want to achieve. So, for example, in Facebook, there's 11 different types of campaigns, and it's really built around this approach, where if you want to do a video campaign or an awareness campaign, you choose that campaign. Whereas if you wanted to do a product remarketing campaign, then that's going to be more about the sales and the conversions. So, you know, you can chop this up, and actually when you look at the detail, there's lots of different types of campaigns that can be used for different things. But you'll notice with paid, it's much more focused on getting the conversion or getting the sale. And that's where a lot of marketeers spend all their budget and their time. They focus on this bit and they forget about these bits up here. Now, there's a big problem with that, because if everybody's going after the same key phrases in Google search or the same audience in Facebook, you get what we call bid inflation, and it gets very expensive. And you get to the point where actually you almost buy all your clients. And so the only way you can really be successful then is to make them aware of you. And so instead of them looking for the product, they look for the brand instead. You know, we look for, I can't think of anything. Yeah, so we look for Nike when we're looking for trainers. So instead of looking for the specific trainer, we look for Nike as an example. We look for Adidas because we are engaged with that brand, and that's a brand we're loyal to. This is a scary table. I'm not going to go through it, but it's just to illustrate the sort of plethora of types of channels and advertising plans, campaigns and platforms that we use, and which ones work with which. And you can see a lot of them try and do everything, But and that's just because they've got these different types of campaigns which can be used for different things. But our job as an agency is to advise you where to spend your money and what ones to try first. And it really depends on where you are and what you're trying to achieve. Social media is very much the same. If you look at the different platforms, obviously they attract different types of audiences, and you can understand which type of platform for which type of audience. But interestingly, Facebook, most people think is a B2C platform, but you can get to B2B if you're using ads as well. But you can use it for different things. And when you get to see the slides later, you can see the different types of campaigns, whether it's organic or whether it's paid, and how you can use these different platforms to achieve different objectives. So what we need to do now is understand what you and your business need. So what we need to do is understand what you need to focus on, but we do have this balancing act between what your needs are and what your customer needs are, and therefore, you know, what you should be focusing on as a marketeer. So one of the things I like to think about is actually who's coming to your website and whether they're ever likely to buy from you. So in this grid, what we've got is the people that are not likely to buy from you and the people that might buy from you now or in the future. And then you've got to look at the mindset of the people that are arriving. Do they already know you and trust you, or do they not trust you or know you at all? And you can see that you've got different strategies depending on who they are. So if they already know you and want to buy from you, then your strategy needs to be about converting them. Your content on your website, your ads need to be about making them buy and not putting them off. Whereas if they're never going to buy for you and they don't trust you, they're just browsing or looking for free information, then really you shouldn't be spending any time on them, and you should just provide that information and maybe they'll recommend a friend. There's other people that you know, they already know you, but they're not really interested in buying, but they may be able to buy in the future, or they may, again, you might be able to convince them. And then you've got the people that want to buy, but then they don't really trust you yet. And so this is about providing the information and the trust signals which will make and reassure them and get them ready to buy. And obviously you want to try and move people from these different matrices. Another thing you've got to consider with digital is that you might not actually interact with your customer on it, you know, in a digital world, and you've got the offline and the online interaction there. So they might do their research online or offline, but then they might actually convert online or offline. So if you look at the traditional retail, that's completely offline, and actually traditional sales processes for B2B were mainly offline as well. And then you compare that with the completely online world of e-commerce and SaaS, where software as a service, where everything's done online. You know, they never touch the offline world. But you've got other combinations. You've got showrooming, where people do the research in store. They want to go and sit on the sofa, but then they want to, or go and, you know, talk to the Currys and see the appliance, but then they go and buy in Amazon. And then vice versa, they do all their research online and then they go into store to purchase because they want that interaction. Or they pick up the phone and talk to you, or it's a lead generation process, which then a salesperson finishes off. So again, it's much more complicated than most people think. So what this means is I really have to give you some advice. And at the end of the day, I divide my strategies into two prongs, really. So if you need immediate results or you're new, what you've got to do is focus on getting leads and sales now. And most of the time that's going to involve using paid media, because nobody knows who the hell you are. So what you've got to do is generate traffic, and then that means you can start to improve your site. You can use Google Analytics and benchmark your performance and actually understand what works and what doesn't work. And that is really key, because you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So for many people that are new to digital marketing, this is what you should be focusing on. And paid search is often the first place, because that's where the demand is, that's where people are actively looking for you. However, if you're more established and you've already using paid media, then what you've got to do is focus on building your brand. This is what James was talking about. This is about being more strategic. And there's a whole plethora of techniques that you can use. But SEO, social media are going to be really, really important for this. But you can also use things like paid display and paid social to get your video or your content in front of people. And then you can then follow it up and take them through the different stages. And when we're doing this, we tend to have a two-pronged approach. We've got the always on, the PPC ads and the SEO that happens all the time, and then more of a seasonal spiked approach where we might be targeting certain times of years or certain products or services. Okay, so I wanted to just go on to my audience first marketing. I just want to check with Omer. How much time have I got? Have I got 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
For another 5 minutes, I think.
Okay, thank you. So audience first is more about segmentation and understanding exactly who the audience is, and then giving them the content that they want to see. And the first stage of that is to understand the personas. And this example is for a card and gift site. And this was actually a pitch for a specific client who I can't name because I'm under an NDA. But it's a traditional company that everybody in the room would have heard of. But you can break down the types of people into the different stages, different persona types. But all those different people, they might be a different persona, but they're going to be different stages in the buying cycle. So they might be already aware of the brand, or they might be engaging and ready to buy. You know, they're considering different products. It might be somebody's birthday and they're looking for a gift and a card, or they're actually at that point where they've done their research and they're about to hit the buy button. So you can see you've got different people at the different stages. So this is an overview of that. We've got different people at different personas, we've got different stages in the buying or different need states, and then you've got different types of content or themes or marketing channels that you can use to get to them. And then if you map that all out in a nice scientific matrix like I would do, you get all these different combinations and you realise that the complexity of the type of content that you need. Now, some of that will work for more than one, so don't think, you know, that you need, in this case, how many combinations I've got 15 to, you know, there's over 100 combinations here. So don't think you need 100 pieces of content or 100 different activities, because some will do more than one. But you do need to be aware that different things will work for different people at different times. So some of the innovative techniques that we're doing to make this happen. So first of all, if you may not be aware, that in social media, paid advertising, we've got some really detailed types of targeting that we can do. We can do this around demographic interests and behaviours. And you can see, for example, in the case of cards and gifts, we can, you know, target people that have an anniversary or have a birthday. We can also do what's called lookalike targeting. This is where we're trying to find people that are similar to our ideal audience. And usually what we do is we either upload an audience from our current database, or we use the pixels on our website for when they actually buy from us and look for people that have actually similar to the people that have actually purchased. Now, the way that we do this is what we use an integrated approach. So this is the idea of doing this in sequence, but you can also run them in parallel as well, because some people will be coming in at different times. So you can be running campaigns to do each of these, but you can also do campaigns where you start off with an awareness campaign, and the most cheapest is video views at 1 or 2 pence. And then from there, what you do is you can create a new audience, and then with that audience, or with PR or other types of campaigns, we get them to go to your product page or your content page. And then from there, what we do is we then try and give them an offer and take them to that next stage where we actually get them to convert. So what we're doing here is we're driving them through the different stages. And a lot of these techniques rely on the technique called remarketing. Now, remarketing is where you re-engage your audience based on the fact that they've been and interacted with you before. So they've watched your video, they've been to specific pages. And you can do remarketing across most advertising platforms, and it's a really powerful technique. In some cases, you can also do what we call dynamic remarketing. So if we all went to John Lewis's and looked at a pair of jeans, what we'd see as we went into Facebook or we went into Gumtree, we literally stalked around the internet with that same pair of jeans, and then a load of others as well that are similar or might be something that we would prefer to buy. And this is really powerful if people haven't actually purchased and they've abandoned their cart, because it means that they're reminded of it and they'll go back and rebuy it. And then I think my final slide on this section is just that if you are doing this, it's all very well getting the right audience and targeting them with the right channel, but we do have to get the creativity right. And we have 6 rules about getting that creativity right, which is actually, there was a presentation today that we did in our weekly webinar, which you can always go back and look at later. I just got a load of free resources for you. So we run a webinar nearly every week on Friday. So you can go and have a look at some of the stuff that we've done before. We've also got a free academy with lots of useful PowerPoints and presentations if anybody wants access. And of course, when you get the slides, you can go and click on these. And we also run a 12-day DMI course, and the next one is October. And this is really practical, hands-on. It's very different from the university marketing courses. It's more about actually how you do each of these techniques. And finally, I've got a whole load of resources and training material which you can look up afterwards. And then the last thing is I am looking for some grads. I've got some 4 trainee opportunities which will be later on in the year. So if anybody's just finished their degree and they're looking for an opportunity to train in digital marketing, or if you're currently in marketing and you want to skill and cross-skill, I've got some vacancies in that area as well. So please contact me afterwards. And that is it. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Anne. And I mean, one of the things I thought was really interesting about what you were talking through in your presentation was what I would call a kind of a level of technical creativity. It's almost like there's almost like a creative there's a creativity in having the ability to blend together all of these various technical opportunities. And whereas creativity in marketing has often been looked at in terms of content, we need to increasingly look at that in terms of process. And the second question that came to mind was I was just wondering if you could just say how important do you think brands are in if you like consolidating a lot of those business assets together? Do you think brands are more important in the digital marketing environment because of that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen, I mean, we call performance marketing where you just focus on search and everything. And we were in that business for 10 to 12 years of our 15 years of career. So, you know, I've been in digital marketing for 20 years, and it's only really been in the last 2 years you've seen that sort of creative integrated approach. And that, I think, is because of Facebook. Facebook changed the game. Even Google's had to follow suit and follow some of this. But I don't think it's big brands are necessarily the best at it. Sometimes it's the smaller guerrilla brands like Gymshark that are actually much better at this. But I do think that this, I mean, I joke about the fact that I'm the scientist of the agency, and Tom, who's just joined us, he's brought in the is brought in the art. And I do think that, you know, there is this balance of data and creativity. So you called it sort of creativity in the process, whereas I sort of think of it as more of the data driven way that we link campaigns together. But I think we've almost gone full circle to what I was doing, you know, before I did digital marketing, and it's building the brand. It's more about content. It's just you've got a lot more techniques to get to new audiences by using the paid. We did quite a lot of research. I did a big survey at the beginning of the year, and most marketeers are really comfortable in the owned and earned space. They get email, they get content, they get blogging, they get PR. They don't get paid. And to me, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this Generation X reskill, because there's a whole generation of 40 and 50-year-olds who've done 25 years in marketing, and they haven't got a clue some of the stuff that we do. And they're being left behind, you know, and that's what I call the digital skills gap. There's a generational gap there. Whereas the younger guys, they've been brought up with it, you know, it's second nature to them.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true, Anne. Okay, thanks. I think we should now go to our next speaker, which is Lauren there.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks very much. Hi, Lauren. Are you ready with your presentation?
I sure am.
Okay, thanks. Over to you then.
I am Dr. Lauren Vargas, and I am representing the One by One project. It's a multi-partner international initiative bringing together cultural organizations, policymakers, academics, professional bodies, support agencies, communities of practice to build digitally confident museums. And this is being led by Professor Ross Perry at the School of Museum Studies. And this is really to address the digital skills gap within the museum sector for museum professionals. And over the last 3 years, we have been looking at how we might create more courageous and confident museum professionals, where digital is not just belonging to the few individuals in the organization or in the institution, but rather is embedded in all jobs, all responsibilities. How could we create better communications, better collaboration externally with visitors and audiences if we are more confident and courageous in using digital to foster communication, to foster better marketing opportunities, if we practice these particular skills, these capabilities from the inside out. So what we found through our research in working with UK museums, and over the last 2 years in particular, a combination of UK and museums in the United States, is that in order to create this digital confidence, especially when thinking about those digital capabilities that are needed for digital communication and digital marketing, we needed to create some scaffolding, a framework for digital confidence internally. So we needed to think of new ways to communicate and collaborate. And of course, over the last year and a half, we have been forced into that situation where those digital means were not necessarily known by many more than the 1 or 2 individuals in the museum or in that particular profession or institution that were responsible for having that external voice. And so over the last 2 years in particular, we have been embedded in these museums, working through digital maturity, through everyday micro digital transformations, meaning that even our choice not to invest in new technologies, not to invest in new skills or processes is impacting, is transforming our cultural organizations. And we started to introduce business tools like user experience journey mapping, like digital maturity assessments, to increase the confidence and the courageousness of museum professionals and being able to take a human-centric approach to identifying fit-for-purpose digital tools, practices, and processes. And so we've done all of this in a really open way. We've been using Mighty Networks, an online community platform, in order to bring together museum professionals from all over the world to share their stories, to share their uses of these business tools, and to go beyond digital skills as competencies only, and really start to focus on what are those capabilities, what are those literacies that we need to start to develop. So we have a series of activities that we have undertaken with our action research, including book clubs, including workshops where we go through digital maturity assessments as a group, where we kickstart conversations within the organization so that they can choose the right means for digital marketing, and taking that true, having a true understanding of their user, of their audience. And oftentimes that begins with better understanding the employee experience. So one of those tools that we road tested over the last year is the Digital Culture Compass, the tracker. And that came out of the Culture is Digital report from 2018. We have been building a periodic table of skills, which will be available next year. But all of this is being done out in the open. We are researching out loud. And the reason we are building this periodic table of digital skills is that we have found that a lot of people, a lot of organizations are focused too heavily on those technical competencies and not really thinking about how we might consider what we already have, what we might learn from other sectors, other inspiration. And most importantly, sorry, went one slide too far, that we need a combination of business intelligence skills, emotional skills, and those digital capabilities and literacies in order to have and grow digital maturity. So for us to use all those wonderful tools, for us to use those wonderful platforms that are available, we need to have a better understanding of strategy. We need to have a better understanding of the different user steps, a different understanding of how our processes enable or hinder, where that friction exists. And we can't just go ahead and launch into social media or community management if we don't have an understanding of how to cultivate inclusive conversations, inclusive community through digitally augmented or digital first means. So that is why we are building this periodic table of skills, and why we are doing all of this through the digital commons, not doing it in a silo, this research in a silo, but really bringing in professionals to help us road test the business tools and build a set of competencies, capabilities, and literacies to build the digital skills for every single job, role, responsibility within the museum sector. That was quite a lot to take in, and I'll be happy to take questions and answer any questions during the networking period. Thank you so much.